Module 2 is about transformational versus transactional leadership. We believe that if you're going to implement Six Sigma or any other quality program, you need to go through some sort of culture change in order to be effective. Those that are involved with implementing these programs and leading the culture change need to have a roadmap. And we believe that's what we're providing here. We'll start out with a brief discussion of our objectives, and then in part 1, we'll discuss the 6 levels of quality system implementation. This is a model that we use throughout the Six Sigma for Managers program, and it's fairly foundational. Part 2 will explain the difference between transformational and transactional cultures. Part 3 is a primer on leadership. You may have seen some of this before, but sometimes it's nice to see things wrapped up and summarized in a nice clean way. Part 4 is a discussion of ethics. We want to show how it ties in to transformational change and how it's an important consideration. Part 5, we discuss the transition from a transactional to a transformational culture. And finally, another look at this whole model is through the lens of results versus means way of thinking. One of our objectives is to show you Hayes's model of quality system implementation. It has 6 levels that provide a really good model for showing how to transition from where you're at to where you want to go. So we're trying to provide some deeper understanding and context for helping people in the transformation process to help their organizations grow. We also want to show that this model is very synergistic with other thinkers, and they've written a lot of books that are kind of interesting parallels to what we're going to be discussing. So we want to show how all this ties together. So in part 1, we're going to discuss the 6 levels of quality system implementation, what they are, and how to look at them various ways. Some of the material that I'm going to present is based on my doctoral research at Pepperdine University. My dissertation was titled An Assessment of Executive Awareness and Corporate Use of Statistical Methodologies in the American Automobile Industry. That was motivated by 15 years of consulting with executives and commiserating with other consultants and quality professionals about our difficulty in reaching the people in the boardroom and getting them to understand the transformation that was required in order to implement quality systems. The QS 9000 standard was from the automobile industry, and it got the attention of executives in that industry at least about the use of tools and statistical methods. In my survey of over 300 executives, I asked them what they knew about quality tools and statistical methodologies that were mentioned or related to QS 9000. Here's a list of what they are. I'm not going to go over them in detail, but they were asked to assess what level of understanding they had of these tools and also to what degree they believed they were being used within their companies. The survey also asked a lot of demographic questions, as well as for executives to assess quality and customer satisfaction and what their preferred methods would be for learning about quality tools and statistical methods. This provided a very rich data set for correlating the use of tools and methods with results and demographics. But what I want to show here are the highlighted words. The level of quality system implementation results correlated with the quality results was very interesting, and that's what led me to the research that you're going to see presented throughout this program. One of the interesting results that I obtained is shown here. I like to show this when I present this material to professional groups or to my colleagues. This shows the response of executives about their level of involvement with implementing quality systems. And what I like is that it seems to be a very truthful response. These executives very easily could have claimed they had a very high involvement, but it looks like they were pretty honest about what they were actually doing. Here's another interesting result. Executives were asked to assess how their customers would rate their quality. And I think this shows a very honest response. They could have very easily said very high, again, to look good on the survey, but I think they were being very honest. So let's take a look at the 6 levels of quality system implementation. The first level is having no quality system at all. The second level isn't much better. It's the realization of the need to change. But at least at this point, executives have decided that they need to do something if they're going to implement their quality systems. The third level is the strategy phase, where they begin to develop a top-down approach on how they're going to implement quality systems and begin to put things into place. The fourth level is where at least there's a quality system in place to react to customer needs. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. But we have both internal and external customers. But I believe at this point what we're referring to is responding to the external customer's needs. Level 5 is the next step, where now, besides responding to customer needs, we have a proactive system in place to find quality problems internally, correct them, and thus prevent more quality problems. And number 6, level 6, is a fully integrated customer-focused quality system where from design through production into the hands of the customer, we have a focused, integrated, feedback-oriented quality program. When I put a question on the survey about the 6 levels of quality system implementation, and I asked executives to indicate what level they believed they were at with their company, I didn't know what to expect. When I got this result, I thought it was very interesting. It intrigued me. I noticed that almost all the responses were for levels 4, 5, and 6. But what this also gave me was a rich data set for investigating the differences between the organizations at levels 4, 5, and 6. And this led me to a lot of the work that I've done since. Here are some interesting results from the research as well. For example, level 6 companies seem to have a very high use of benchmarking in cause and effect diagrams. Since I discovered this, I have found other research that shows that world-class companies do have a high use of benchmarking. Another finding regarding the top 2 levels was that they have a very high use of mistake proofing flowcharts and gauge R&R studies. Mistake proofing is also known as poka-yoke. Gauge R&R studies relate to measurement. And I think what this is saying is that companies that are at the higher levels take measurement very seriously. Finally, what the factor analysis is saying is that all of these quality tools and methods can kind of be grouped into 4 different areas, at least based on the way that they're using them. And these 4 areas would be for data-driven design and robust design, for process control, for variation reduction and prevention, and for problem diagnosis and process improvement. Now we'll be touching on these areas later on in other modules as we discuss some of the tools in more detail. It was mentioned that one of the objectives of this module was to relate the 6 levels to other authors and other theories and concepts. Here's a list of some of those. One is Senge's mental models, as discussed in his famous book, The Fifth Discipline. There's an Ernst & Young study that correlates very well with the 6 levels and these findings. I think the practice of statistical process control also maps into the 6 levels. Of course, Lean and Six Sigma will be shown as well. And at the bottom, I'm pointed out leadership theory and theory X, Y, and Z that are also highly correlated to what we're talking about. Many of you have probably read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. It was a bestseller about 10 years ago. I found a very high correlation between the 6 stages that he developed and the 6 levels of quality system implementation. I think it's very helpful in understanding them. The same can be said about De Bono's 6 thinking hats. I think those are also helpful in understanding the 6 levels of quality system implementation. Kohlberg's moral maturity levels help us understand the 6 levels from an ethical point of view. Management by Means came from a book about the Toyota production system, and I think it helps us understand the top levels when we compare what Toyota's doing. And all of this gets wrapped up into what we'll call the executive roadmap for strategic planning. For sake of completeness, I thought I would put some references in at this point. Some of these refer to material discussed in Module 1. Most of the rest refer to material in Module 2. Here's a second page of references. Let me point out that the top reference, Tom Johnson, the book Profit Beyond Measure, is about the Toyota production system. And the last reference by Smith is from a Six Sigma conference, and that's where some of the material was gathered, used later on to talk about the 6 levels related to Six Sigma.